Today on my workbench I have a Harmony remote control. This is a Harmony 880, and what's happened with this unit is some of the buttons are no longer working. If we start it up here, it's not going to obviously control anything because the equipment's not in here that this is programmed for. But we'll see things like, for example, some of the buttons don't work. You'll notice that the little transmit indicator is working here, but if I press things like the volume buttons, the volume up, if I press it hard it'll work. Volume down, again, it doesn't work unless I really press it quite hard. Same goes for the directional control. The left arrow button doesn't work, up arrow doesn't work, right arrow doesn't work, down arrow does, and the OK button. But if I press them really hard, they work. So we're going to take this thing apart and see why these buttons are not working on here, and see if maybe we can fix this thing. So first we remove the battery from it, and then we have a couple screws that have to be removed to open the unit up. Now this is one of my favorite remote controls. This is my own personal remote, and I've been reluctant to get another one just because the newer ones are all touchscreen, and I'm not a big touchscreen fan. I like the actual physical buttons as opposed to having to touch a touchscreen and go through menus. Now that the screws are out, we're just going to pop the unit apart, and we can just probably just have to pry this thing apart a bit here. There it goes. Whoops. Just a couple little plastic clips here that you just have to press, and it will open right up. So here's our little circuit board here, and as you can see, these are just little detent switches, little like a calculator, and on the keyboard side all it is just little plastic buttons that push down. So there's no problem with these rockers. These work fine. It's got to be, the problem's got to be these switches themselves. Well, let's just put the battery in and just see whether pressing the switches directly works. So we'll just let this unit boot up here for a minute. So as you can see, I can press buttons here and it will start the activity. Now remember, it was the volume buttons over here that I had problems with, as well as the navigation buttons. The other buttons all work fine. It's just these ones here that were problematic. As you can see, volume down's working there, volume up, well, it's actually working. I'm not actually having to press that hard, and they're all working here. So it might be just a case of, see, all the buttons seem to be working. I think it's just a case of the little plastic push rods here that push down on the key switches are wearing out. They're becoming compressed, so you have to press it harder to make the contact. So maybe if we just put something between the buttons and the keypad itself to add a little bit of thickness. I'm thinking maybe a couple strips of tape, for example. It will give us just a little more clearance. You know, it'll take out some of the space there so that the buttons can make contact, because everything appears to be working. So what I'm doing is I'm just putting small bits of tape, just little thin pieces of tape over top of all the buttons that I was having trouble with. And this will just add a little bit more thickness, and hopefully that will be enough just to give them a little more push, a little more tension. And we'll try this here in a minute. So the remote just snaps back together. Now we can reinstall the battery and see whether we've made any difference at all. Okay, the remote's booted up again. Let's select my options. Okay, now remember, these buttons weren't working before. There's down, left. Left is still a little bit sticky, but down worked. Right is working great. Up is working great. Okay, don't have to push it that hard anymore. Volume up is working. And volume down, to give it a little bit more pressure, the volume down is working. So now just the left and the volume down. We'll just add another layer to those ones because the other buttons now all are working nicely. Well, as you can see now, it works. It works really well. Now, you want to try and keep if you're going to use black tape, I'm going to go back and I'm going to redo it and make them a little smaller because that circuit board here, that's the electroluminescent panel that lights the screen up. So if I dim the lights down here so you can see, of course, by covering up the electroluminescent panel, I'm going to effectively reduce the light that shines through here on the buttons. So I don't want to cover up too much of it. I'll show you the electroluminescent panel here in the dark. I'll open this thing up so you can see what part glows. So when you're doing this repair, you don't want to cover up too much of the panel itself, the electroluminescent panel. And I'll show you the part that glows. It's the white strips. Those are the parts that emit light. And it's actually the circuit board that's on top of the all this area here, this white area. This is what emits light. This top board here, this is your electroluminescent panel. These wires here are actually what carries the high voltage to the panel itself. So as you'll see if I dim the lights down here, you can see what part glows, right? All this glows. So you don't want to cover up too much of this area here or you're going to really reduce your backlight that shows up on the buttons. And that's what makes this remote look so cool, is all these little glowing buttons. So I'm just going to go back and rework this and just trim the little pieces of tape so that they don't cover this up. Now that I know that this fix is going to work, I'm going to go retrim this and make them a little thicker and just put them just on the actual pads themselves. I just thought of something that actually might do the trick. I took some heat shrink tubing and I shrunk it down to its small size. And I think maybe if I can get this tubing to fit over top of these little posts that stick up here, I can get a little bit of extra length to press the buttons. That's the plan anyway. I'm going to try and get this heat shrink tubing to stick over top of these buttons and see whether that'll give me the required extra throw that I need for these worn button assembly pushers, basically the little nibs that have worn out that press down on the little switches. So once I've got the heat shrink tubing installed, it looks like that. That'll just give us a little bit more depth. I'm going to do the same for the other buttons and we'll reassemble this thing and see if it works. Here we go. I only put them on the ones that were the most problematic, that being the left and the volume down, because the other ones weren't as bad. The volume down now, just touch it and the volume goes down. Volume up. Doesn't require any effort either. Left arrow. No effort. Down. Right. Up. Enter. So the ones that were the problem was the volume down. That was the biggest problem. Turn the volume up. Could turn the volume down. It didn't work. I'm going to put some more of this on some of the other buttons. I only put it on 2 of them there just to test it. It does work, so I'm going to do the rest of them and we'll see what happens. Once again, we just cut a small piece of our heat shrink tubing and just put it over top of the button that is problematic and just press it over top. Takes a bit of working to get the button down there, but once you have it centered, it'll work its way on quite easily. That just gives us a little bit more clearance on these buttons, and that gives us just a little bit more throw to make contact with the switches on here. Okay, heat shrink tubing attached to around all of the affected buttons. You can see that it's raised up a bit because it's pushing it up a bit higher now because of the depth that I added to it. But as you'll see, if you look at the screen here, all the buttons now work as they're supposed to. Just a very light touch, up, down, left, right, enter, volume up, volume down. No effort needed. My mute button should be done too because it was a bit, it's not so bad. It was the volume up and down that were bad. I can live with that. I'm going to say that this is a success. So there you go. That's how you fix one of these things. If you've got some, oh, I got a bit of fuzz in there. I'm going to take my remote apart again just to clean that off the display. But I'm going to say that this is a 100% success. And I turned a remote that I couldn't really use that well into one that I can, once again, control my whole system with. That's what I like about this particular remote that I don't like about the new ones. And in fact, I kind of despise the new ones because I like my direct access buttons for my PVR, record, stop, skip, etc., fast forward, rewind, skip. I like my direct access buttons, and I like my direct access numeric keys. Whereas the new ones, they've gone to a touchscreen and you've got to select a menu, and I despise it. So I won't buy one of the new ones as long as I can keep this one working. Hope you enjoyed this video. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye.